gentlemen.
Hello out there in podcast land. As you know, of course, you are here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. And what we do here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole is we pick a theme each and every week. We explore that theme. We talk about it until something inspires us to talk about something else. We talk about that until we can't talk about it anymore, or Craig gets bored with me talking about rambling about bullshit that doesn't have anything to do with the main topic, and then he brings us back.
Yes, and as Jason said, we researched every topic. We take usually a week in between podcasts and do our research. We research both sides, not just what fits our narrative. And then we also include our opinions because this is entertainment. But today is all opinion-based, so you don't need to worry about that. But if you're easily offended, get to stepping.
And with the theme that we have this week, you might just be offended anyway. So I'm just going to throw that out there because we are going to be talking about some weird shit over the next couple of minutes. So, Craig, what is our theme this week?
Our theme this week is our favorite horror movies from when we were a kid.
Yes. So I have to throw out the caveat, and we are children of the 80s, 70s, and 80s. Essentially, early 90s is when before we were legally adults, before we could be tried as adults. So I am very closer to the age of the kids in Stranger Things. You're only a year older than me, so you are too. So
right.
I was 11, 12, 13, in that range, and when Ghostbusters was out. I was in 5th grade when Ghostbusters came out, I think. So
sounds about right.
Think of in terms of the kids from Stranger Things. That's our age bracket. When those kids are older, they're us.
Right.
Okay. They role played. We role played. They play video games. We play video games. They rode bikes. We rode bikes. We went out in the forest, tried to find werewolves and other critters out in the forest. They had real monsters.
They sacrifice goats. We sacrifice goats.
There you go. We did.
Oh, shit. My bad. I wasn't supposed to do
that. Because we'll talk about actual animal sacrifices here in a while, because we are talking about horror films.
Right.
Now, growing up, especially your mom was one of the biggest influences we had to getting into horror films.
Right.
This particular story, because if you've listened to our podcast, you know that we spent a lot of time together as kids. We spent a lot of time out in the woods, but there was also a lot of time that we'd come home with 6, 7, 8 videotapes from the video store, and we would watch every single one of them multiple times in the 5 or 6 days that we had them. Well,
right.
Your mom tells us the story about the scariest movie she's ever seen. This movie made her spend a week sleeping with the light on. Of course, that movie was Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
Which, by the time that we had seen when it finally came out on VHS, and got to the video store, by the time that we had seen it, we had seen shit that was way beyond what that movie was.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. Well, it's like, oh, shut the fuck up. We've already seen people's heads get cleaved off. We've been seeing people strapped to table saws and that get turned on with the light switch because they're down in the basement. We'd actually seen all that stuff. So when we were actually laughing through it the first time that we'd seen it.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't until years later that I'd watched it again and looked at it as more for the art that it was, and I appreciated it more.
Right.
But having this build-up that your mom had given it was almost like a Blair Witch build-up.
Yeah.
To this movie. So your mom was one of the biggest influences, definitely in my life, to start watching a lot of horror films.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Same here. I mean, I pass that tradition on to my kids. I did the same thing with my kids. We would watch horror movies. Like my daughter, who's 13 now, we sat down here one night and watched, it was one of the Chucky movies, one of the newer ones, and I was like, Jesus, that's 2 hours of my time I will never get back. At least I got to spend it with my daughter, but we were both like, God, that sucked.
Right, right. It, the whole, I never understood that. We'll start with Chucky.
Yeah, because that came out in the 80s.
It came out in the 80s.
88, I believe.
And it's one of those franchises that you just kind of look at and went, how did this even get a sequel?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to slaughter his name, but Brad Dourif, I think is his name. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He was in the second Lord of the Rings movie. He was the guy that betrayed the King of Rohan. He plays a serial killer who escapes and then puts his soul into this doll. Now, if anybody's ever seen the movie, what happens immediately after he transforms or transports his soul into this doll is basically the toy store catches on fire. Now, what happens when the sprinklers go off, the smoke is there, they throw all that merchandise away, and then the insurance company cuts them a check for their loss, everybody's happy, all that stuff goes to a landfill. No, this particular doll gets put back on the shelf and sold to a family where this little boy gets his magical Chucky doll.
Right.
That turned out to be, a killer. I mean, they're weirder concepts. And we'll talk about weirder concepts later for horror. But I don't understand like the 15 different remakes or sequels that a Chucky had.
Sorry, give me just a second. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was playing with something trying to get my speakers to work, and it didn't. It did not. Yeah, so with the whole Chucky thing, it was just good premise, good idea, bad execution.
Yeah.
It was the 80s, and in the 80s, it was just mass-produced. Didn't matter the quality. Just get as many horror movies out as you possibly could. This was, late 70s, early 80s is when was the advent of the Scream Queen and the slasher films, and it was just get all that shit out as fast as you possibly can.
And you had Trauma Films, Roger Corman Presents, and Canon Films, which they threw out as many films as you could possibly do. Now, Canon Films, which was these two Israeli guys, created this film studio. They were producing 80 to 90 movies a year, where most major picture studios at that time were doing 8. These are the same people where their high budget movies ended up being, they wanted to get into higher budget movies near their end, but they ended up losing all their money because everything that they made from this movie was already producing you're paying for the movie that's coming out next week type of stuff. They were way too fast, but they produced the movies like they did the Masters of the Universe movie. They created Jean-Claude Van Damme and all the Cyborg movies and Universal Soldier. I think there was Universal Soldier. But they also did Over the Top was Sylvester Stallone. But they put all their eggs into those last couple of movies, and they lost everything. But before that, they were making major motion pictures for like $200,000.
Right.
And they were getting 3/4 of the movie done before they even had a script.
Jesus.
So, and it was all about gratuitous tits and ass, violence, and what kind of, they didn't have CGI back then, so it was, what kind of creature could you create as fast as you could to be the monster. They did, right. And then the Corman Films did like Toxic Avenger and those type of things. So I'm not saying those movies are bad, because there's a lot of those movies that I actually kind of like.
Yeah, they're cult classics. I mean, They really are. But, for me, I was never a big fan of the slasher films. The whole Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. Yes, the first Friday on the 13th scared the living shit out of me. Every night I had to look under my bed because of that whole Kevin Bacon scene.
Oh, yeah. The arrow coming through his throat.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't seen it, he was laying flat on the bed. He was going to break the major rule in all horror films. He was about to have sex.
Right.
Girl's gone off to the bathroom. So he's laying on his back in bed. Then a hand comes up from under the bed, clamps onto his forehead, and then an arrow comes up through his neck.
So the thing that I loved about the first Friday the 13th movie is it's unlike all the rest of them because it's actually got you can empathize with the killer because the killer, and okay, fuck you about spoiler alerts. The movie came out in 1979.
Right.
The killer is actually Jason's mom, who Jason was a special needs kid that went to this camp. The kid or the people that were supposed to be watching him while he was swimming went off to have sex in the woods. He drowns. She's mad. She takes revenge on other kids that are at that same camp. It's not the same people. She should have hunted them down like vigilante style. But you almost can empathize with why she's doing what she's doing. She went crazy. She started killing kids that are having sex because her kid died.
Right.
The rest of them, when Jason actually becomes the killer, and the rest of them, they get really boring really fast.
Yeah. Well, and on that same lines, because I mentioned Kevin Bacon, and Kevin Bacon obviously a huge star, and this was during the time of 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon when you couldn't watch a movie without Kevin Bacon and Michael Caine being in it.
Mm-hmm.
But on that same lines, Johnny Depp basically got his start in Nightmare on Elm Street as a victim.
Yeah, and he has still one of the greatest movie deaths, I think, where he's sucked into the bed and it's a volcano of blood.
Yep. Again, another bed death. Because he thought he was going to get some.
So, fun fact about that scene. Okay, if you haven't seen, if you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street,
we don't fucking care.
Or Friday the 13th, pause this right now. Go watch both of those because they're kind of staples in what we're going to talk about. Because a lot of stuff will branch off from Wes Craven doing this, and anyway. But
also go watch The Exorcist too before we get too far.
There'll be a lot of movies that you just have to run out and go watch. But the same room that Johnny Depp is killed in by Freddy Krueger while he slept with headphones on and gets sucked into the bed is actually the same set that's used in a movie called The Stuff, which was another horror film from right around the same time, where The Stuff was kind of in a lot of these movies back then had underground or underlying satirical thing about consumerism and capitalism. There was a lot of these movies like Dawn of the Dead and The Stuff, and there's more. I'm drawing blanks at the moment, but The Stuff was this alien substance that came down that people ate, and they just got addicted to eating it, but it would eat them at the same time. And then they would, at the end of it, they would, they'd throw up like this, it looked like yogurt. But what ended up happening in The Stuff in this room is the bed was full of the substance. It just shoots out, and much like the Johnny Depp scene, but it shoots out this like almost looks like Elmer's glue and pins this guy to a wall, and he gets dissolved. But it's the same actual set.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, both Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, again, great ideas, great plot lines, but you did it to death.
Yeah.
And which really, I mean, when you have, 10, 11 sequels to Friday the 13th, it's a bit too much.
Yeah.
And same with Nightmare on Elm Street. Because after a while, it was just the same thing over and over again, and it just got old. Stick with the first one, then come up with a new fucking idea.
Yeah. So I think this is a good point to kind of talk about some of the roots of where a lot of these movies came from. Now, there was The Last House on the Left, which was Wes Craven's first horror film. Was actually produced by a man named Sean Cunningham. Sean Cunningham is the one who went on to do the Friday the 13th series. So the creator of Nightmare on Elm Street and the creator of Friday the 13th actually worked on the same project earlier, and then they ended from that created two of the most iconic horror franchises in history.
Right.
But they both will go back and give homage to a man named Bob Clark. Bob Clark created probably the first slasher film in history. It was called Black Christmas. Now, Black Christmas was a story about a bunch of sorority girls spending Christmas together, and it starts off with this dude climbing the the shit on the side of the. He climbs the side of the house to say, they got those
Like the
lattice work.
ivy thing.
Yeah, he's got like the lattice work or whatever. He
Yep.
climbs up and gets into the home, and this movie is very influential for a lot of things. First, it was the very first slasher film. It was the first one where dude runs around, kills people for apparently no reason, because there's no reason given in the movie for what he's doing. It's not like there's a backstory with like Michael Myers where he killed his sister when he was a kid. He was just born crazy. You don't even know who the killer is through this. But it's also, and more people know this movie for this reason, the calls coming from inside the house. It's the first movie to do that. So it combines slasher film with creepy phone calls coming from like there were these obscene phone calls that kept happening throughout the movie to these girls, and then they get all upset. And Margot Kidder, who ended up being the first Lois Lane in the Superman movies with Christopher Reeves, she's in this movie, and she has this funny scene where she tells the guy basically, stick it up his ass on the phone, and then she ends up dying. But with that, this movie was very influential because it created the slasher film. It created the you wouldn't have movies like Slumber Party Massacre. You wouldn't have people from the He Knows You're Alone without this movie.
Well, let's get before we go too much farther. I kind of want to touch on that. What made the slasher movie so effective is because before that, your horror movies were like, something from outer space, or werewolves, or vampires, or Frankenstein. It was, but a slasher film is something that could actually happen to you. So that's what made it scary.
Yes, it created an element of realism. Now, through the boredom of the slasher film, they actually turned the realism into cartoonish, because then the deaths became way outlandish,
Right.
But I'll wrap up the Black Christmas thing here right now. The funny thing, or the great thing about this is Bob Clark is not known for being the master of the slasher film, the master of the calls coming from inside the house film. He's not known for any of that. He's known for Christmas Story.
I did not know that. That is fucking awesome. Honestly, that is just truly awesome.
So he did two Christmas movies, polar opposites.
Yeah. And, it was the slasher movies that's where the whole Scream Queen shit came from.
Yeah, I mean, we could run down a whole list. There's Karen Black, there's Jamie Lee Curtis, there's PJ Souls. There's tons of them. I mean,
Adrienne Barbeau.
Everybody knows the Scream Queens.
Yep. So
anybody that's watched these movies knows like the Mount Rushmore is the Scream Queens.
I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to deviate from this for a second. I'm going to ask you a question about, I want to know what these movies have in common. Okay, The Howling, Critters, The Hills Have Eyes, and E.T.
And E.T.?
Yep.
So we have, so I'm going to do that thing that all people being questioned by criminals do when they're trying to lie and come up with something. So we had The Howling.
Yes.
Critters.
Yes.
E.T. and what was the other one?
The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh, The Hills Have Eyes. Is it Drew Barrymore?
No, she was only in.
She was in E.T.
It was Dee Wallace.
Ah, okay.
She was the reporter in The Howling.
Yes.
She was the mother in E.T.
My answer, Drew Barrymore, was actually, I have no fucking clue.
Yep. She was also the mother in Critters. I can't remember the role she played in The Hills Have Eyes. And she was in tons of other shit, tons of horror movies, tons of, like, she guest spotted on TV shows. Like, she was in Supernatural. She's done a lot of paranormal TV shows as well as, like, NCIS and shit like that. But unfortunately, through all of her 246 film and TV appearances, she never learned how to act.
Oh.
Because I watched The Howling the other day. Because that was one that you and I loved as a kid.
Yes.
Now, besides her, that movie still stands up.
Nice. So to me, if you don't know The Howling, Howling is a great werewolf movie. To me, it is the standard werewolf movie.
Yes.
For this reason only. It is when I think of a werewolf, I think of the scene in the construction trailer where it changes right there in front of right there in the room.
Yeah.
It stands tall, it's bipedal, it's got the long, like the Great Dane, or not the Great, the Doberman Pinscher ears, the long snout. That's what I think of when I think of a werewolf. Now, I loved the transformation in American Werewolf in London. I think it was phenomenal special effects for the time. But when I think of a werewolf, I think I'm more scared by the one that stands up that's 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
Like the Michigan Dog Man type of thing than I am of a big wolf.
Right. And, without The Howling, there would not have been American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they both came out the same year. They both came out in 81.
But the success of American Werewolf in London, because that one became more mainstream.
Yeah, The Howling's more of a cult classic, and I think that's got to go back to, again, Dee Wallace's really lack of ability to act, since she was the main character.
And then, I don't know if you've seen all the following Howling movies.
Yeah, I've seen most of them.
The second one is basically an orgy.
Yeah.
And interesting to watch, but not really a great werewolf movie.
No. When I think of great werewolf movies, I think of the first Howling. I think of American Werewolf in London. Honestly, even though it's not horror, I think of the one, it's a newer series. It's werewolves and vampires.
Are you talking about Hemlock Grove?
No, I hate that show. With the dark-haired chick who slept with the werewolf and they had the hybrid.
Are you talking about the Twilight thing?
Oh, fuck the Twilight.
I do.
No, this is like a dark gothic.
I had to throw some levity into there because I didn't know where you're going.
Kate Beckinsale.
Oh, the
Underworld.
Underworld.
Yeah, the Underworld series. That's what, because I love the werewolves in Underworld. I thought they were fucking awesome.
See, and they are stylized in more of the Howling.
Yes.
Type of werewolf, and that to me is that's a werewolf.
Yeah, when I think of a werewolf, I think of something that can walk on 2 legs, or it can walk on 4.
Mm-hmm.
It just changes.
I don't. It can bound if it needed to, but it can also stand up to be menacing.
Right. So I mean, that's where I go with it. And since we're talking about werewolves, we have to talk about vampires. And now in the 80s, we were overwhelmed with vampire movies like we were in the early 2000s.
Yes.
But an unsung movie that most people haven't even heard of starred Susan Sarandon and David Bowie, and that was The Hunger.
The Hunger. Hunger is your stereotypical lesbian lust vampire movie with David Bowie.
Right.
Okay, so that's not typical of any standard, but The Hunger is a great film.
Right. And as Jason and I talked about before the podcast started, the only thing bad that we can think of that David Bowie's ever done was Dancing in the Streets with Mick Jagger. All of his movie appearances were just fucking awesome. He was a great actor, extremely underrated.
Yeah, and like we determined, that was probably to fulfill their cocaine orders.
Right, right. So I mean, but this movie, it was a love story, and it was dark, and it was slow. It takes a while to get into, but once you get into it, you can't get out of it.
Yeah, and I loved. See, this is like this Susan Sarandon era Rocky Horror Picture Show. Susan Sarandon, so she's young. She's very innocent in this movie.
She's beautiful. She's sexy.
Yeah, it's and not to harp on that aspect of it, but it's actually kind of a good love tale.
It really is. Because I mean, and it was like David Bowie aged in that, so like he had to have certain blood every 100 years, otherwise he would just get old.
Yeah, and that was, like that was one of the staples of great horror or vampire movies from this time. There was quite a few. I'm trying to run through my notes here.
Oh, you got Fright Night.
Yeah, Fright Night was a really there was one of those ones that I watched over and over and over again, because like we talked about with the slasher films, Fright Night was almost one of those ones, even though it was a vampire film, it was almost one of those ones that could happen.
Right.
Because it's the dude that's next door is the vampire.
Yeah.
And you're a young kid, and you're the one that figures that out. And speaking of that, I mean, the vampire was Chris Sarandon, so.
Right. Yeah, and but the other thing about like those movies, I have notes. Hold on. Sorry. But also, you can't talk about vampire movies from the 80s without talking about The Lost Boys.
Oh yeah, I was gonna. That's where when you said your notes. But the Lost Boys was the Frog Brothers.
Right.
That was, the Frog Brothers. Come on.
And when we're talking about Fright Night, we're talking about the original, not the remake with what's his name.
With the
Colin Farrell or whatever.
Yeah, and the poor guy from Star Trek that ran himself over.
Yeah. So now back to Lost Boys. Lost Boys, had, like you said, had the Frog Brothers, but it was also the era of the Coreys.
Yes. So
you had Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman one of the Frog Brothers, but Corey Haim was brothers with one kid who was somewhat getting turned into a vampire during the movie.
Yeah. And his brother obviously was Jason Patric, who was a pretty big star in his own right at that time. But what I think is one of the cooler parts about that, obviously, is Kiefer as the vampire, the head of the pack of vampires. And once again, fuck you about the spoiler alert. This movie came out in 86.
Right. And had a great soundtrack by Duran Duran.
Yeah, there's a lot of great songs on the soundtrack, but there's some Doors on there. But one of the most underrated vampires in there was a man named Alex Winter. Who's Alex Winter? He's Bill.
Right.
Bill from Bill and Ted.
Yep. Yeah, he was good in that. I really liked
him. But he went on to right now he's doing TED Talks about internet security, and he did a documentary called The Deep Web.
Yeah. Where
Keanu Reeves actually rejoins him and is the narrator of his documentary.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they did talk about the potential of another Bill and Ted movie, which
I've heard I've heard some things about that they might do that. But yeah, like back to like see, I went on a watching spree for my research. You know, I watched the documentary you shared with me, which was you can find it on YouTube, folks. It's the 50 greatest horror movies that you've never seen.
Yeah.
But I rewatched House with Norm from Cheers and
George Wendt.
Yeah, and the dude from
Ding Dong, You're Dead.
Greatest American Hero.
Oh,
William Cat. That one, I still like that. I mean, it's almost comedy horror.
Yeah.
But I really dug it. I mean, I rewatched The Evil Dead, which the first one was a horror movie, and then they branched into comedy afterwards.
Yeah.
Which, if you're going to do sequels, please do it that way.
Exactly. It mocked itself, which was great. And I love Sam Raimi's just let Bruce Campbell be Bruce Campbell approach of making movies back then.
Right. Well, and for those that don't know who Sam Raimi is, he's the one that directed Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire.
He did the latest Wizard of Oz movie with James Franco too.
Okay. So, but the thing was back then, Sam Raimi was directing low-budget movies, and in every movie, including Spider-Man, would have Bruce Campbell in that car. And the car I'm talking about, for those of you that haven't seen Evil Dead and everything else, is the car that Uncle Ben was driving in Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was his gimmick. That's what he did. He's like, you know, because everybody had to have a gimmick to stand out from everybody else.
Yeah.
So he used, you know, he had a great friendship with Bruce Campbell, so he used Bruce Campbell. And honestly, without Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell wouldn't have gone on to do the things that he did.
Yeah. And so, and if you haven't seen it, probably the best non-Sam Raimi thing that Bruce Campbell ever did is Bubba Hotep.
And Burn Notice.
Okay, that's good too. Bubba Hotep, if you don't know what it was, I'm gonna talk about it a little bit. It came out in the 2000s, but it's Elvis didn't die. He's in a nursing home in Louisiana, and he's with a guy who's Black JFK.
Okay.
And it's Ossie Davis, who's a great actor, and Bruce Campbell playing men. Obviously, Elvis today is old, but they fight a mummy in a nursing home. Is it some kind of Bubba Hotep? It's a bizarre concept, but it's a great movie. I recommend it for anybody who just wants to get into Bruce Campbell.
Right.
I mean, Ash versus Evil Dead is a great series. You should watch that, or just the Evil Dead movies. But Bubba Hotep is another one up there on his list.
I'm gonna backtrack us a little bit because, you know, there were certain horror movies that really got us hooked on horror movies that we watched with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And those were like Jaws. You
Yeah.
know, Jaws was the iconic because Jaws made me afraid to go in a fucking swimming pool when I was a kid. Because we would play shark, and then you start getting freaked out when you think of Jaws is fucking coming.
Yeah, you know we're in the backyard in Michigan.
Yeah.
There's not a saltwater body for like 2,000 miles.
Right.
Even though my high school mascot was the shark, which is fucking weird.
Right. Well, and, you know, so you got Jaws, which that movie stands the test of time. I mean, really, it does. You can go back and watch that, and it's still just as good now as it was back then.
I mean, Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss. I mean, it's a great cast. Spielberg obviously directed it.
Yeah.
And luckily, the mechanical shark that they created for this movie didn't work. So the way that he ended up having to shoot it with, which was almost like the point of view type of thing that was created in Black Christmas, because you kind of get the point of view from the killer's view. He kind of took that and the less you've seen of the shark, the scarier the movie became.
Right. And I mean, it's from Jaws that shows like, well, the one with LL Cool J when they're in that underwater thing.
Oh, Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, that's where you get movies from that. It all comes from Jaws. And
Yeah.
again, another movie that they sequeled to death. But other ones that got us into it was like we mentioned earlier, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, but also Halloween, which we've talked about Halloween in our Halloween podcast.
Yes.
But these are movies, and then you have the really fucking creepy one being Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which went on to breed a sequel of cult classics.
Yes. Now, what I love about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is if you watch it today, it's relatively tame by industry standards. I mean, with the exception of the fact when the woman is running around near the end of the film when Leatherface is chasing her around with a chainsaw, a lot of the blood that's on her is real because they made her run through like thickets and brambles and stuff like that. She got all scraped up. So a lot of the blood that's actually on her body is her own. So that's the part that it kind of makes that movie stand out a little bit. You can't get away with doing that to an actor today. That's all.
No.
But a lot of these movies, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, were actually taking the story behind them was influenced by a Wisconsin killer named Ed Gein. So Ed Gein, if you don't know, we should do a whole podcast on Ed Gein. But Ed Gein was the basis for him. He was the basis for Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs. He was the basis for a ton of other characters. But he was that shut-in, and Norman Bates was based after Gein somewhat. He was a shut-in who lived with his mom, and his mom, was his whole world, essentially, kind of like Norman Bates. But when she died, he shut her room down, and it stayed pristine, the exact way it was when she left it. But the rest of the house was it was a house of horrors because he would go grave robbing and steal bodies and then peel their skin and try to make suits and lampshades, and he made bowls out of the tops of skulls. He's only killed 2 people that they know of. They think maybe he killed his brother too. His brother died out in the woods, and then the woods burnt down.
Okay.
So they think that maybe he killed his brother too. But his story is so strange and so bizarre that it's actually real life that somebody was like this. So that when you're seeing these outlandish characters like Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, who wants to make a suit out of women's skin so that he could feel like he's more of a woman, this fucking happened in the 50s with Ed Gein. And then bands like Slayer went on to create a song, Dead Skin Mask, which is about him. The character from Red Dragon / Manhunter, the Thomas Harris book, he was kind of loosely based on Ed Gein as well. So a lot of this stuff in this time, I mean, because this is also when these horror films are going on, this is also what they refer to as the golden age of serial killers, because you had Gacy and Bundy and Ridgway and a bunch of these others that were going around the country, and Tommy Lynn Sells, you have Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas, all at this time operating around the country, actually running around killing, doing their massive amounts of killing. That you're seeing these movies in the theater, but then you're coming home and you're hearing about these crimes when these people get caught. You realize that kind of makes a lot of the earlier slasher films that much creepier, because the fact that it's like, oh shit, this is kind of rooted in reality.
Right.
It's not until you get to the supernatural, the vampires and the demons and shit like that it gets a little bit outlandish.
Well, I'm going to change gears here. There's a movie that developed a habit with me and got my ass kicked as a kid. I developed a nervous laughter in inappropriate times. And it was The Exorcist. Now, do you remember the scene in the church with the Virgin Mary when the statue was desecrated?
Yes.
Okay. I saw that and laughed, and my mom whooped my ass.
It's the particular desecration of the Virgin Mary is I can see where a mother would be kind of like, why the fuck is my twisted little child laughing about, the Virgin Mary with a penis?
I couldn't help it.
Right.
And I was like, it's her fault. She got me into that shit. But this is my all-time scariest movie, is The Exorcist. I don't think, to me, there was not another movie ever that topped it.
For me, hands down, same.
Because, again, this is shit that, has been documented to happen.
And this is the movie that just like what they did to poor Shelley Duvall in The Shining with Jack Nicholson and the Stanley Kubrick, the director. That woman is still in therapy today from PTSD from the shit that they did to her. Max von Sydow, who plays the older priest in The Exorcist, quit numerous times during this movie because the script that they had for what little Reagan says to them is not what she says to them.
Oh, yeah?
Your mother sucks cocks in hell?
Yeah.
Was not in the script that they had. William Friedkin, the director, told her to say that just before the camera started rolling.
Oh, wow.
So when she turns to him and says, your mother sucks cocks in hell, he quit. He's like, I can't do this. I can't have this little girl saying, I can't listen to a little girl saying this stuff.
Right.
And the other part was William Friedkin had loaded guns on set, hidden. So when he wanted to get an honest reaction from his cast, he'd fire a gun.
What the fuck?
Right. It was. It's shit you can't do today.
Right. But, shit done back then either.
It's kind of a funny side story about The Exorcist. It takes place in Washington, D.C.
Right.
The most iconic place for that is those stairs. And I've actually been on those stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Funny because when you go to the top of them, there's no house right there.
Right.
There's a sidewalk. It's to get from one part of Georgetown down to the other. And when you get to the bottom of the stairs, you're basically in the parking lot of a gas station.
Okay.
So they make those stairs look so ominous and so like out in the middle of nowhere type of thing. But no, it's like, you can go over there and get your 44-ounce big gulp just right in that little gas station.
Right, but this movie was also done in the mid to late 70s, so that gas station might not have been there at that time.
It probably.
But yeah, I mean, there's everything about this movie scared the living shit out of me as a kid.
Yes.
It had me like sleeping with my head under the blankets and stuff and just terrified. As my mom's, Night of the Living Dead, where she had to sleep with the lights on. I had to sleep with the lights on after watching The Exorcist.
Oh, yeah. Now, once again, like we said earlier, if you haven't seen The Exorcist, it came out in 1973, so go fuck yourself, go watch it.
Right.
If you've never seen it before. So don't forget about the spoiler alerts. What I will say, though, is the second one sucked ass.
Mm-hmm.
Because she gets in like this psychic battle with like Damien from The Omen or some shit like that. I saw half of it and I couldn't stand it anymore.
Which one was it where they were in the hospital?
That is the third one.
That one freaked me out.
I love Exorcist 3.
When
that's where I wanted to segue into it, because the rap that The Heretic or Exorcist 2 got was so bad that a lot of people wanted nothing to do with this. Now, the third one was actually directed by William Peter Blatty, the guy who wrote the book.
Okay.
And it stars George C. Scott and Brad Dourif. We've talked about him before. And then the guy that played Damien Karras, he's the young priest who the demon jumps into, and he jumps out the window and kills himself on the stairs.
Right.
He doesn't die. The demon keeps him alive, and he's found somewhere else. But then he ends up in this mental institution, and he's just been catatonic for like 17 years. Well, a detective who's played by George C. Scott happens to be I forgot why he's in the hospital, but he is in this thing, and he happens to look in there, and he sees his old friend, the priest. So he starts talking to him, and then finds out that the body of the priest is actually possessed by the priest and the lost soul of a serial killer named the Zodiac Killer.
Okay.
And it's just like they do mention this in that 50 greatest horror films that you've never seen. They talk about there's a jump scene, and I have never jumped this high, this far in my life in a movie theater around friends. Because when you're I was 16, 17 years old when this movie came out, and you got to be a big tough guy, so
Right.
nothing bothers me. So you're sitting all the way through this thing, and then when I'm not going to say what the scene is, because you'll know it when it happens. When it does happen, I literally jumped in my seat, and my buddy started laughing at me. But more of it was nervous laughter because they did the same thing.
Right. Yeah. See, and it was movies like that really got me. It was, movies about ghosts. Those are the ones that scared me, because I believe that I still believe those could happen today.
Exactly.
And that's where you get the fear factor, is from things that could actually happen. Now, your vampire and werewolf movies, you watch those more for the cliché, the whatever you want to call it, the niche. But with these movies, you watch them because that shit can actually happen, and you want to get scared, so that's why you watch them.
Yeah. There's a lot of religious. I will hate to use the word guilt, but religion builds up this whole notion of good and evil.
Right.
When you see something like that, especially as I grew up Catholic, so when you watch something like this where demons and possession and stuff like that, even though it wasn't something that the Catholic Church themselves would talk about, but exorcism was something that everybody knew that was there, because they have their own book on how to do an exorcism. And they train priests on how to do exorcisms. They don't admit that they do it, but they do. And so when the idea of, a lot of times you get movies where some unwitting person gets possessed. Like, let's say, like it's not quite the same, but kind of the same as like the movie The Shocker.
Yeah.
Where he's a serial killer, he gets electrocuted, and Horace Pinker just changes bodies. He puts his soul into another person so that he can keep going. He can keep going. So when you see movies like that, most of the time it's like a construction worker. It's a cop. But even though Shocker had a point where he was a little girl, this is one of the most innocent looking children that has ever walked the planet, in Linda Blair, sitting in a bed, saying some of the most vile things, as her face is just becoming fucked up. So that one resonated with me, and it still does to this day. I watched it. I haven't seen it in a couple years, but the last time I watched it, it's like, oh man, ooh, I'm still kind of squirming.
I mean, she was also wasn't she at one point fucking herself with a cross?
With a crucifix.
Yep.
Oh, Jesus,
And,
no.
and then there's the scenes that were deleted then when they re-released it, where she crab walks up the stairs.
Right.
That was fucking freaky as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not somebody. I mean, that movie scared the living shit out of me. I can't say it enough. But I mean, but that's why we watch it. It's, and as I think we talked about in our fear podcast, fear and excitement trigger the same responses in your body.
Yes. It's just how you manifest it is the difference. We won't go into that right now because we already did it. It's another podcast. Right. You just said it. Go listen to it.
Yep.
Pause to listen to that one, come back.
But there is another, I mean, along that lines, I mean, we can't talk about The Exorcist without talking about Amityville.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've talked about Amityville in our paranormal one that was fucked with by the paranormal.
Yeah.
But it's, the Amityville, the original and the remake with Ryan Reynolds, I thought was really good as well.
Yeah, I did too.
But that was another movie that just scared the living shit out of me.
And if you don't know the story is it's Thanos' dad, James Brolin, who's the star in this movie. Him and his family buy this home, and it's based off the book that the DeFeos, I think was their name.
Yes.
Yeah. And they were the Lutzes. The DeFeos were the people that died in the home first.
Yes.
Okay. So the Lutz family buys this house, and they're only living in the home for a month. But all this crazy shit, possession and, red rooms and blood dripping down the walls and flies and all this other stuff happens over the course of this month, and then they move out.
Right.
We're done. Now, part of what happened in the real Amityville story, a son comes home and shoots his entire family with shotguns.
Right.
A shotgun. And the creepy part about it is the bodies weren't disturbed, but they're all still in bed like they were sleeping. So how do you kill 5 members of your family with a shotgun?
It was a 30-06.
What's that?
It was a 30-06. And those loud as fuck.
So the question rises, how does, and that's really where, and he said that he heard voices that told him to do it, and then the Lutz family moves in and they hear shit. So there's a lot of history with the home, and the home is still actually there in Long Island. They changed the address, and then they took the iconic half moon windows out to try to disguise the home, but it's still there.
Right. But yeah, I mean, so you got Amityville. Can you think of another possession movie from the 80s? I know there was a shit ton of them.
Well, there's not really possession, but there's a whole host of movies that still are kind of the same genre, like The Omen, where the child is possessed, or the child is the son of the devil, or Rosemary's Baby, where she's having the son of the devil.
Right.
And so there's a lot of great horror films that have religious tones in them, and they hit home because a lot of people that is that's in their heart. Right.
And kind of similar to that, on the same lines, was the movie Trick or Treat.
Oh yeah. Oh, fuck yeah.
With an awesome soundtrack by Fastlane. But the premise of this movie is you got Skeeter from Family Ties playing a metalhead in high school, and his favorite singer, the guy that went to the same high school he did, and the man was keeping him down and blah blah blah, and he's getting bullied at school, and then he finds out that his idol, this singer Sammy Kerr, died in a hotel fire.
Mm.
And the movie also has Ozzy Osbourne playing a priest. It has Gene Simmons playing a radio DJ. So he gets a tape from Gene Simmons, and then Gene Simmons turns around or gets his tape, goes back, plays it, and all this weird shit starts happening. Basically, Sammy Kerr had made like a pact with the devil or some demon or something to come back in some form and just raise hell.
Yeah. I really love that movie because, well, partially because of the soundtrack.
Yeah.
But I was a metalhead. You know, I love metal music, so it's like, you know, I was never picked on or anything like that, like this character was, but it was almost like I knew the light, you know, I kind of related to the kid a little bit.
Right.
You know.
Right. I think
seeing Ozzy as a priest was awesome.
Yeah, and then having him get pulled from the screen and eaten.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome too. But yeah, I mean,
Gene Simmons goes on to play a priest in The New Guy with DJ Qualls.
Okay, yep.
He ends up playing he gets his screen time as a reverend.
So yeah, I mean, but that's, you know, another movie along that lines. Plus, it was kind of that, you know, the little guy, you know, wins the day and gets the girl and blah blah blah. Yeah. So it was it combined like, you know, an 80s romantic movie with an 80s horror movie.
Right, it's like
the underdog wins, saves the day, gets the girl.
Yeah, it's like Poltergeist meets Can't Buy Me Love.
Right. Which Poltergeist, another movie that we have.
Exactly. I kind of wanted to segue into there because we were talking about ghosts and stuff like that a little bit, and once again Spielberg. But the thing I loved about Poltergeist is it's not really. It was a PG movie, and it scared the hell out of me. The clown scene today still.
Oh yeah.
The clown tree, the clown and the tree. That poor little boy got the bump.
Yeah. Come into the light, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite scene in that movie, and it's not a scary scene, it's actually a funny scene, is Craig T. Nelson standing in front of a mirror, sticking his belly up, going before, then sucking in, going after, going before, after, before, after, before, after.
I thought you were going to say the end credit scene where they're at the motel and Craig T. Nelson pushes the TV outside.
Right. Yep. That one too. But I like it. It wasn't just scary. It had some comedic moments to it, and it had a good cast. Mm-hmm. I mean, that little girl passed away though, didn't she?
Oh yeah. That's the thing with that movie is a lot of people associated with it are dead. The older sister died. Carol Ann died. A bunch of crew members also perished.
Well, didn't the lady who played the psychic medium die too?
Yeah, she died too. You know, so a lot of people that were associated with that movie, unfortunately, passed away mysteriously.
Right. Yep. So,
but she did. The little girl did end up going on to do the second one. I don't think she was alive for the third one.
Right.
The second one, which to me is the guy that's walking around in there is the guy from the cover of Anthrax Among the Living.
Okay.
It's not, but to me that's who it looks like.
And also the guy from Phantasm.
Beautifully done movie.
It's more. I rewatched it like a week ago, and it's a bit campy now, but it's still good.
So Angus Scrimm was the Toll Man. He was like this evil funeral director.
Mm-hmm.
He would turn people into like dwarfs, like these like evil dwarf things that would go on and do his bidding. But
there were those dwarfs are, to give you an idea and a picture in your head, they looked like those little hooded figures from the Star Wars movie where when you first meet Luke Skywalker.
The Jawas.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then the most important feature is the orbs.
Yes. Yes.
So they're like shiny ball bearings that fly around, and then like drill bits would come out of them, like forks would come out of them, shrimp or crab forks.
Yep. They were the Swiss Army knife of
Yeah.
orbs.
Yeah. Really, really, really cool movie. And that one is funny because when I was young, obviously we were into horror films, but two of the movie posters that weren't like women bending over cars that I had on my walls growing up was I had a movie poster of Phantasm 2,
Okay.
and then I had a picture of Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And there was one night, I woke up in the middle of the night, had this weird fucking dream that had Freddy Krueger in it. But I think I get woke up not because of the dream, but because it was a huge thunderstorm going on outside. And as I wake up, I'm kind of looking, my eyes are starting to come to big bolt of lightning, lights up my room, and all I see is on the wall on the end of my bed is a Freddy Krueger poster. I pooped a little.
Right. Yeah, that would scare the shit out of me.
So
there was another campy style movie like along these lines. You remember the movie The Gate?
yes.
Yes, where they open up this portal to demons. Just kids, their parents went away and left them for the weekend, and it was campy. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It's worth a watch.
Was the guy that was in like the Blade movies? What was that dude's name?
Wesley Snipes?
No, he was the bad guy, the young white guy. Kind of looks like Ethan Hawke, but not Ethan Hawke.
I can look it up real quick.
But his first like starring role was in that, or first like screen time was in that movie.
Okay.
Kind of like and I'm gonna go duh when you finally find it, but kind of like Kevin Bacon in Friday. What?
Steven Dorff.
Steven Dorff. Thank you.
Yep.
Because Steven Dorff was started with The Gate. Johnny Depp with Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. Kevin Bacon, Friday the 13th.
Right.
Kevin Bacon had some weird roles when he was young. He was the abused kid from Animal House. Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Yeah.
And then he gets an arrow through his neck when he finally gets the woman.
Right.
But so now we've talked about a lot of those type of movies. Now, one of the things that they did, especially in the earlier 70s, was throw warnings and disclaimers on horror films. This movie was banned in 47 countries. We have like the Faces of Death VHSs, which were
those are just fucking horrible.
They were all fake except for like an actual surgical autopsy that was going on.
Yeah.
So, but when we go into video stores when we were kids, we would see all these different movies. It's like banned in 47 countries, banned in 700 countries. I didn't even know there was 700 countries, but I guess this movie's banned except for Wademan, Michigan, where you can buy it on VHS. You can rent it on VHS.
Right.
But one of those movies was legitimately banned, and that was Cannibal Holocaust. Now,
never heard of it.
I went back and watched this movie again, actually, just last night, just to see how it held up. Now, there's an importance of Cannibal Holocaust because everybody gives credit to Blair Witch Project for being the lost footage, starting the lost footage movies. Cannibal Holocaust is actually about lost footage. So what it is a group of kids go explore the Amazon looking for lost tribes, and they want to kind of make a documentary about the savagery of these cannibals. Of course, when your documentary is about savagery of cannibals, you shouldn't pick fights with them try to get them to do stuff to make your film look better.
What? Are you sure?
So, what ends up happening? So, the long story short, professor goes down there to try to find what happens to these kids. Gets down there, he meets the tribes, kind of befriends them somewhat, but you see some of the ritualistic things that they do before then. He gets their footage. He brings it back. A big media firm wants to release their footage, but he's like, I will not put my name to it until we watch it first. So the last 45 minutes of the movie is them watching the footage / reacting to the footage.
Right.
And there's fucked up shit that happens here. I mean, obviously all the kids die. You know, there's rapes, there's tortures, there's impalements. But the reason that this movie was banned is I think I looked it up, there's like 6 animals that are actually killed on screen. There's like this little 2 monkeys, a pig is shot to death. But the most vile part about it is the actors catch a big turtle, and then they open up its shell, and then they actually go through it, and they're trying to find the meat so they can cook it. But it's all captured real. It's real on camera.
That's fucked up.
It's very fucked up. This movie came out in 1980. The director was he's an Italian man. They filmed it in the Amazon. And when they went to release it, the director was actually arrested for making a snuff film because the animals died for real. And it looks very realistic and very stylized on that the actors look like they get killed too, because they actually have natives playing the parts of the savages, of the natives there. So instead of spending his life in prison, or however long you spend in prison in Italy, I don't know, he actually had to bring the actors to the courthouse to prove that they were still alive.
Imagine if one of those actors was pissed off and go, yeah, I'm not coming.
Yeah, I overslept.
Yeah, he's go to prison.
So a lot of those warnings were, we'd laugh at as kids, but this one, and to this day, there's a lot of countries that you can only get an edited version of it and you should watch the edited version that doesn't have the actual animal killing and skip the turtle scene. But, there's you can't get the full unedited version in a lot of places.
I wouldn't want it.
If you want to go down that rabbit hole, you can actually find the unedited version on YouTube. Yeah. That's how I ended up watching last night. And I just wanted to see if it held up. But that movie it changed Hollywood.
Okay.
Because now you can make an intense movie for no money. And now you didn't have to have, because you look at movies like The Shining, and which came out the same year. You look at even The Exorcist and American Werewolf in London. I guess that came out later, but these are classics. But a lot of money. Alien, a lot of money. Cannibal Holocaust, other than a few special effects here and there, a bucket of blood, some fake skulls, and a good makeup artist, it didn't cost them any money except for getting to Antarctica and then shooting on location in New York City.
Right.
So that actually opened up the creativity for people like the people that did Paranormal Activity, which made that movie for nothing.
Right.
They made that first movie for zero, and they shot it in their own house. So it showed that you could create something that was lasting, that was influential, and game-changing. As long as you were creative, you could do it for nothing.
Right. I want to go back to the 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon
Mm-hmm.
and Kiefer Sutherland, because yes, this movie came out in the year 1990, but it's still the end of our childhood. I turned 18 that year, so it was the end of my childhood.
Right.
Flatliners.
Okay. And we're not talking about the Ellen Page thing that I didn't have to see to know it sucked.
No. This was Kevin Bacon, Kiefer Sutherland, William Baldwin, Oliver Platt, Julia Roberts. They're all a group of med students, and they are trying to find out what happens when you die. So they would basically kill themselves with some sort of injection, and then have the rest of them around to bring them back to life so they could get a glimpse of the afterworld. Now, this movie, I rewatched it last week, and it still stands up. It is a great fucking movie.
I saw it 4 or 5 years ago, and I was still impressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's got Kiefer Sutherland is haunted. Again, it's a movie that came out in 1990, which is like almost 30 years ago. So Kiefer Sutherland is haunted by this kid that he accidentally killed when he was a kid.
Yes.
You know, after he dies and comes back, this kid comes back and just literally is kicking the fucking shit out of him. Like,
repeatedly over and over and over again. Because Kiefer's has the guilt that he was a bully.
Yeah.
And the actions of him being a bully ended up causing the accidental death of this kid. I mean,
the weird thing is you can really see that bully character in the movie before he's really gets haunted by this kid because of his drive to get these answers that they're looking for. He's bullying the people into doing what he wants and not giving them information that they need.
Yeah. His story arc is what makes it, because he's got this meteoric rise and then this, epic, cataclysmic fall there. And then the others have their thing, the Baldwin one's kind of tame compared to the rest of them. It's like, oh, you're cheating, you're cheating your fiance with everybody, you're kind of a college kid. That's kind of what happens. So,
but you're videotaping it all without their consent.
Which is a crime.
Yeah.
As we talked about in one of the other episodes about the Revenge of the Nerds kids should be sitting in prison for the same reason.
Right. But, also, I mean, so Kevin Bacon bullied a girl when he was in school, and this girl bullied him. So he basically went and apologized to her for it. Julia Roberts is haunted by her dead father, who she didn't really know why he died, but then found out because he OD'd on heroin.
Yeah.
So they had to get closure on these things in order to stop being haunted by them. And Kiefer Sutherland couldn't really get closure because closure he needed was dead.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to spoil the rest of the movie for you. Now that you got go fucking watch it. It's good.
It's a really good movie, and I didn't want to watch the remake, the Ellen Page remake, because I was afraid that with her in it, as I don't even know if she plays I don't know who she plays, but she can't really hold a candle to anybody's acting abilities. And
right.
That's obviously when you see the movie Inception, which is a interesting movie in itself, and she's so bad in it.
Yeah. But, and she just does that awkward shit. Now, we talked about that before. We don't like that.
If the best role she was ever in is when she plays Jim Leahy's daughter in Trailer Park Boys in like season 4. She's a little kid. That's her first starring role, or first role.
Right.
But anyway, back to that movie does stand the test of time, and it's one of those, like, it was a pretty popular movie. I mean, it did well at the box office, everything.
Well, because it had an all-star cast.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that I get sad to see that they remake these and put a spin on them just for the sake of a money grab, because just re-release it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everybody still knows all those people that are in it.
Yeah, they're still good actors. They're still big stars. And
Fuck.
the thing is, it's not only that, but it's if you instead of redoing it, just come up with your own fucking idea and create a new fucking movie for God's sakes.
Right.
Lazy motherfuckers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to now branch into Stephen King.
Okay.
So Jason and I talked last night on the phone about Stephen King, and I said, there's something about Stephen King movies that I can't figure it out. And I finally did. I figured it out just like 3 minutes ago. I just had an epiphany.
Nice.
What it is Stephen King was brilliant, and still is. He's still alive. But what he does with
follow him on Twitter. You'll see how brilliant he is.
Yes. And what he does with all of his books is they're all interrelated. They all happen in the same area with some of the same characters that make repeat performances. And when you watch the movies, you still get that. You get that, the tie-ins and stuff like that. And I couldn't figure it out how to put it into words last night, but I just finally did. But so I rewatched. I did a Stephen King marathon the other day where I watched a couple. The ones that I can't watch are the ones that involve kids. I watched them when I was younger, like Pet Sematary and Children of the Corn. But the ones that involve kids, me being a father, those really bother me.
Yeah, and they redid Pet Sematary too with a girl instead of a boy.
Yeah.
That comes back. So anyway.
Yeah. So, but the one that I really liked was The Fog. And yes, they've remade The Fog. I haven't watched the remake. But most of the stuff happens in Maine, in Castle Rock, or if not in Castle Rock, people refer to Castle Rock throughout, somewhere in the movie or the book. But The Fog stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Adrienne Barbeau, and these were scream queens, sex symbols, because back then sex symbols was a positive thing.
Right.
But Adrienne Barbeau plays a disc jockey in a radio station, and the fog creeps in, and there's shit in the fog that's killing people, and it's just really good.
Yeah.
If you watch the TV show The Mist, that's what The Mist is based off.
Now, one of my favorites of Stephen King, and you're right, they do take place in the same world and it was actually a TV movie. It was, and it's not it was Salem's Lot.
I love Salem's Lot. Awesome.
It was made for TV, so it was toned down, but the way that the way that they created this world of this little town was, I thought it was brilliant, because they build you up. Hey, somebody's missing. Okay. And then they build you up. And you feel, throughout the whole thing, you felt like you were a part of the community. You got to know all of these characters, like in the first, and then shit happens.
Right.
So it was, and a lot of movies, like they had the opportunity to do this this is a movie that came out, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, called The Crazies.
Okay.
It with Timothy Oliphant, who was from Justified and one Die Hard movie where it was a cyber movie. But in The Crazies, it's where people just, they go nuts, and then they get almost like the rage virus type of thing from 28 Days Later. They had the opportunity to build this small community, but instead they make it myopic, and it's all about his family. So when he starts going to like the kids' t-ball games, and this dude shows up and he's trying to attack kids and he has to shoot him, you don't really get a sense for the community there. But with Salem's Lot, they did that in a miniseries. Granted, it's a 4-hour show at that point, so you get a lot of screen time for each person. But I really liked how they developed
Was it as good as the movie Salem's Lot?
You know what? It's almost like saying, I really enjoyed the miniseries It, and I really enjoyed the remake that they just came out with the kids.
Okay.
It's only the first half of it, but chapter one, I almost look at them as two different things.
Okay.
I enjoyed both, but I liked the development of in the TV show better.
Okay. I'm gonna have to check out that TV show. I never saw it. But yeah, because the TV show's got Rob Lowe, Andre Brower, Donald Sutherland. Donald Sutherland was a staple in horror movies.
Yeah.
Him and what's the other dude? Malcolm McDowell.
Oh yeah.
And
Roddy McDowell.
Yeah, Roddy McDowell and fuck. I lost it. Had it, lost it. Yeah. Anyways. But yeah, so in my marathon, I tried watching Children of the Corn. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. But back to the Age of Corey's, I watched Silver Bullet. And I know I'm going to let you talk about Silver Bullet. And
so when you said that you were watching Stephen King movies, you said,
yeah.
I watched 3 of them. And I go, please tell me one of them was Silver Bullet. And he said, of course, which I was very happy with, because if you don't know what Silver Bullet is, it's another werewolf movie, and werewolves are probably my favorite movie monster ever. But this one has Corey Haim, the deceased one of the Coreys, the non-Goonie, but also has Gary Busey as his like eccentric uncle. And what I really liked about this is because it brings in what Stephen King got known for, is creating kind of like before M. Night Shyamalan, the M. Night Shyamalan twist. This was a werewolf movie where people were dying. They didn't know what was really going on. But Haim, I'm doing it now, figures out that the werewolf is actually the local Catholic priest. And throughout when he's trying to come to grips with this, he has to figure out, how am I going to stop a werewolf? Because spoiler, Corey Feldman is handicapped. He has to be in a wheelchair, but his uncle makes him like a motorcycle wheelchair that's got flames down the side. It looks like a redneck Coors Light can all painted up. But so he has to try to figure out how to deal with this werewolf, but he's now armed with a mechanized motorcycle wheelchair and a box of fireworks.
Yeah.
Now, one of those is something that I would use to fight a werewolf, because I just use it to get the fuck away.
Mm-hmm.
Fireworks, maybe not. But
right.
I've always been a huge Gary Busey fan too, so
right.
That's one of the reasons why I really, really like Silver Bullet, because I love werewolves, so.
Right. Well, and it was at the time, it mixed that family values with horror.
Yeah.
Because you saw the strained relationship between a boy and his sister who, was basically jealous of the attention that her brother got because he was handicapped, and how she would get blamed for everything, even if he did it.
Yeah.
But she still loved him because that's her brother.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw this relationship going on throughout the entire movies. I mean, there's more to movies than just, oh, it's scary, oh, it's fun, oh, but you got to really kind of look at and see how the relationships happen inside a movie. And when you start seeing stuff like that, it adds whole new levels to your viewing enjoyment. There you go. There's my lesson on how to watch movies.
Well, Carrie is not an interesting movie and a memorable movie because she got blood dumped on her at, you know, and they made fun of her and ironically made her prom queen. Carrie is a good movie because you felt the pain and the torment that Sissy Spacek had up until her breaking point, where she fucking freaks out and now she's got telekinetic powers and she fucking kills people.
Right.
When she snaps. So a good movie is more than just, and that's why you and I agree on the slasher film, where if your whole premise of your movie is to invent new ways to kill people, we don't give a fuck about who. If we don't give a fuck about who's dying, then we don't give a fuck about your movie.
Right. It's same thing with the Saw movies, you know. But like you're saying about with Carrie, I mean, this is a girl who is tormented at school and then tormented at home by her strict Catholic mother who punishes her by locking her in a closet and all this other shit. And she got punished because she started her period.
Yes.
You know, and that was a sign of the devil is getting him, blah, 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 blah. And just going fucking nuts with shit. So, I mean, you see this girl taking everything from everybody until she just can't fucking take anymore and blows.
Yeah. And now this is another one that they redid. They redid it with Hit Girl. And I didn't see it, didn't have to. And I'm like we talked about before, it's like I'm tired of seeing all these movies getting remade. Just re-release
the
original. It'll save you a lot of money, and just you know if you have to spice up some of the features with CGI. I don't give a shit. But it's like Gus Van Sant redoing Psycho with Vince Vaughn doing a shot-for-shot remake. Why don't you just colorize it?
Right.
You know, and then call that good. What's the fucking point of making the same fucking movie? You know, just add some color. You know, do the old Ted Turner colorization thing that they used to do with those black and white movies.
That's what kills me about this shit is, you know, it's like the whole, I want to redo it because I can pay tribute. You're not paying tribute. You're just making money off somebody's memory.
Right. It's a cash grab.
Yeah, it's bullshit. You wanted to pay tribute to somebody? Do something new in a fashion that you think they would do it.
Okay. With that said, there is a movie that I want to remake.
Okay.
Because for no reason other than I was young, this movie scared the hell out of me.
Okay.
And I had to face my fears this week and step up and finally look the boogin in the eye and watch the movie, The Boogin.
I don't remember that movie, but I know I watched it. I remember the name.
So it takes place in a mining town in Colorado. You don't know where because they don't really say. But these people are trying to reopen this mine to try to bring back the economy or whatever. But when they're starting to explore the mine, they find that there's on the map there's one shaft of this mine or one avenue of the cave that's blocked off. It's supposed to split, but it doesn't. So they blow it open with dynamite. And there's a guy there that's like, you shouldn't do that. You know, there's always the old creepy guy, and he's putting crosses around the thing. But the reason that it was closed was because there's these creatures in, God love early 80s special effects, but this thing was like a seal with huge, like giant spider eyes, but only 2 eyes, and octopus tentacles with hooks on the end. That was a booger. Now, the physics involved with this thing, and it screamed. It screamed. But the physics involved with the creature, it couldn't even fucking move. Unless it split itself across the ground, and then its belly would just be... Anyway, it should be an aquatic creature, but somehow it's in a cave on land. And it's got big eyes. But anyway, the movie scared the hell out of me as a child. And when I watched it this time, I was pretty much giggling all the way through it because the acting was bad. And it's got those those late 70s, early 80s stereotypical like ski patrol characters. Like, we're just gonna go up there and all I want is pussy. I want
Right.
sex, and that's the single-minded focus of the one dude, which now he'd be put on a list, or Me Too movement would destroy this individual.
Right.
But so you're watching this, it's like, okay, it's kind of like a sexploitation romp, but that creature scared the hell out of me because it somehow gets out of the cave and there's like these tunnels under the ground, and they go into the basement of this cabin that these people are staying at.
Now, see, I can see remaking a movie like that because then you could actually create what the technology we have today. You could create a better monster. You could create a different plot for that monster and the characters in the movie, and get people who can act.
Yeah. Yes, that'd be huge.
And actually turn it into a good movie.
And there's a lot. There's a lot of those type of movies where it's like, things were lost for a reason.
Right.
Type of movies out there, but this was one of those, and I was just fuck, that movie came out when I was like 8.
Right.
So
along these lines of movies that came out and we watched when we were really young, we would go to the video store, and I mean, we would spend as much time in the video store as people do on Netflix trying to find something to watch. Yeah. We would go in there and we'd go and just try to find the most obscure horror movies. And when we did that, we ran across a movie called Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Oh, yeah.
Worst fucking movie in the world. I can't even remember the plot. I refuse to rewatch it because I remember how much I hated it back then. I just remember a bathtub death scene.
Yeah, and so they find a spell book, and they do some kind of like little ritual, and they bring people back. They bring dead people alive, if I remember correctly. Like, I haven't seen it since that moment, and I don't ever plan on seeing it again.
Right. I'm going to IMDb it real quick while you're talking.
Okay. But yeah, I remember we were like, ooh, this is going to be good. We're good. There's that old adage that you don't judge a book by its cover. And this is, don't judge a movie by its VHS cover, especially if that VHS cover came from Cambodia.
Right.
Because it had nothing to do with what was on the back or on the jacket.
All right, here we go. Here's the IMDb description. An acting troupe led by Alan Ormsby goes to a graveyard on a remote island to perform a necromantic ritual. The ritual works too well, and soon the dead are walking about and chowing down on human flesh. The dwindling group of survivors struggle to escape. And this movie came out in 1972.
Hey, you know what? It should have stayed in 72.
Yep.
This movie's left me because I was living too much in 72.
Right.
But yeah, that was bad.
It's so bad. I think it wrecked all of the actors' careers because I don't recognize any of them. But we talk a little bit about remakes, and okay, there was a remake. I didn't really care for it, but it has a cult following, and that is the remake of The Fly with Jeff Goldblum.
Yes, and it's been since remade again, but David Cronenberg took on this, and if anybody has ever seen Rick and Morty, this is what they're talking about when they're like Cronenberg world, Cronenberg Morty, Cronenberg Rick. He was the master of what they referred to as body horror, which just means that people got transformed into just fucked up shit. And I wasn't a huge fan of the movie because it was slow paced.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do like Gina Davis. So it was she put in a decent performance in it as his girlfriend.
Right.
And I love Jeff Goldblum.
Right.
But watching him throw up on a guy and his hand dissolves.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I'm grossed out by like snot and bodily fluids and shit like that. So that movie really kind of like, ugh.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm gonna throw up. I'm not scared. I'm just nauseous.
But Jeff Goldblum does have one. It does have a great line in that when it comes to that. It's like, I can't eat donuts. Solid food hurts.
And while we're on these '80s movies, you really can't talk about '80s horror movies without talking about Hellraiser.
Yes. Now I haven't really heard his name in a long time, but Clive Barker.
Yes.
So Clive was like the second coming of Stephen King, the new master of horror.
Yeah, him and Dean Koontz were both labeled that.
Yeah. But Hellraiser was especially the first one. I don't know if I've really seen, like, there's like 11 more of them or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen any of the other ones, but that first one is just a cool story.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the movie per se, but it kind of freaked me out too. Especially Pinhead.
Yeah. The Cenobites, or
yeah.
What it is this box. It's a puzzle box, and when you solve it, it opens up and it brings these demons from this dimension of pain to come through and torment your soul for all eternity. But in this, there's some brothers, and the one who figures this thing out goes into this thing, gets tormented by them, but somehow finds a way to come back. And the creepiest part about the whole thing to me was, as he's like, each time like he gets more and more blood, he regenerates more. And then near the end, he's just nothing but he's got no skin. And he's like, it's me, it's Uncle so and so. I forget what his name was.
Yeah.
But in the end, he doesn't take his own form. He takes the form of his brother.
Right. I forgot about that. But I mean, it was one of those movies that relied a lot on. I think what they were trying to do. I know they were trying to base it as close to the book as they possibly could. But back then, you also had a group of movies that you knew were going to turn into cult classics, and the way you did that was with dark ritualistic sex.
Mm.
And they did a lot of that in that movie as well.
Yeah, that's like a Clive Barker staple.
Yeah. Whereas like Dean R. Koontz had some books that were turned into movies, like The Watchers, with another Corey Haim movie with the dog.
Yeah.
But Dean Koontz's movies never really took off like Stephen King's did. And I mean, back to Stephen King, you can't really talk about Stephen King horror movies without talking about Cujo. Again, D. Wallace.
Yeah.
But the big monster Saint Bernard that just goes fucking nuts and rabid. And again, something that could fucking happen.
Exactly. And another I don't remember what, I'll have to look it up, but I don't remember what year this came out, but another not Dean Koontz, but a Clive Barker movie that came out was Night Shift.
Oh.
With Craig Schiffer, and they were a group of people that lived in the shadows. I don't 100% remember the actual story, and I just remember every one of them was all fucked up shapes, and the dude had like a crescent moon as a head. And
are you sure it's called Night Shift?
Late shift, night shift, night something or other.
Because my IMDb, I've got The Night Shift, the one with Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton.
No, which is also a great movie. They start a brothel out of they start a whorehouse out of a
right.
Morgue.
But the rest of them are all stuff that came out in like post 2000. Maybe it was Late Shift. I think it might be The Late Shift. Let me look it up.
I'm looking. I'm trying to look up his IMDb right now, but my computer's running slow.
TV movie Late Shift that came out in '96. No, it's not. I don't know.
Well, he's a dude from He was in the movie
I know how I can do it. I'll just IMDb Clive Barker. And then go filmography. All right, you keep going, and I'll figure out what this movie's called. Was it Nightbreed?
Nightbreed. That's it.
Okay. Just gotta find it. Mm-hmm. What was Nightbreed about?
Nightbreed was this guy that they do. He goes on the run, and then he gets involved with, or somehow, I don't remember how it actually starts off, but here when I'll read you a troubled young man is drawn to a mystical place called Median, where a variety of friendly monsters are hiding from humanity. Meanwhile, a sadistic killer is looking for a patsy.
Nice.
And the killer wants to kill all the people that are in the
right.
And actually, David Cronenberg is actually in the movie as an actor.
I saw that. Yeah, but I mean, Clive Barker never really got to the level of Stephen King, and neither did Dean Koontz. And it's not for lack of trying, because they both put out a lot of stuff, a lot of content.
And it's funny too, because a lot of earlier King works didn't make good movies.
No, they didn't.
Like Graveyard Shift and Lawnmower Man, and a lot of those didn't.
Graveyard Shift was a dumb fucking movie. That was one of my marathon of Stephen King movies that I watched.
Oh, you made it through it?
I had it on while I was working out. It was background noise.
Okay. Yeah, that was a bad movie. And then
horrible special effects.
But then they took little bits and pieces of other stories and created like some masterpiece, like Stand By Me,
right, or The Shining.
The Shining, so some of his were really good on screen.
Right. I mean, The Shining, the original and the remake were both good.
Yeah. So just some of those middle ones, not so much.
Yeah.
Overdrive. Now that was a fun movie.
Yeah. Or along the lines of bad ones, The Dead Zone, Thinner.
Yeah.
Gerald's Game. I couldn't even finish watching that.
I didn't even start it, so you got farther than I did.
Or no, not Gerald's Game. Misery. I did watch the whole thing, but I just thought, well.
I did see that one.
I started and didn't finish either.
But right when that movie came out, I was actually in a cast on a broken leg. So watching him get his leg broken again wasn't fun. Right.
But Kathy Bates did a great job, and so was it James Caan?
James, yeah.
Yeah, they did a great job. I just didn't care for the movie. I didn't like the book either, though.
See, I didn't read the book either.
Yeah, and I've read most of Stephen King's stuff.
One of the things that I loved about the 80s, and this has a lot to do with like the trauma films and the canon films that we talked about earlier, were they just brought out creatures from the deep, kind of like with the Boogans.
Yeah.
But one of them that I loved, the movie's terrible, but one of them I loved just because of the name, Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
Right.
And there's a lot of those type of movies, like you mentioned earlier. You mentioned Critters.
Yep.
There's Ghoulies.
Gremlins.
Yeah, the Gremlins, which was at least the first one was a genius movie.
Right.
Once again, a PG movie that scared a lot of little people.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah, I mean they did a lot of those movies, and but then again, I want to get back to another group of movies that I found scary, and the reason why I found scary because there's no way out, and that would be like Aliens or Alien stuck in a spaceship with this fucking monster coming through there.
Exactly. The first one is it's on another level of
Oh
scary.
yeah. Oh yeah. And
Ridley Scott. I mean, since then, we've had all these different movies, Prometheus and Alien
this
versus Predator.
the, the Alien and Predator franchise, I want to talk about this just for a second, is what I'm talking about when you want to remake or make sequels. Turn it into something else.
Mm-hmm.
They did good job with that.
Yeah.
All these movies can stand alone.
Yeah. But the alien thing is spooky as hell because you get these eggs put in you, and then this creature grows inside you while you're still alive.
Yeah. And then bursts out of your chest.
Yeah. Which everybody's seen that poor scene. It's been mocked and made fun of in a bunch of other things, like in Spaceballs, where he's like,
"Oh my baby, oh my darling, oh my ragtime gal."
Exactly. But Ridley Scott created something. It was new level scary because you're right. You can't go anywhere. Like there's another movie that's in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
Type of spooky. Being in they tried to do something like that with a movie that I absolutely fucking hate, which is Open Water, which came out way later, but they tried to use that "we're all alone" concept, but the woman was so irritating that when they got separated and he was on his own, he was better off.
Right. It's bad if you're rooting for one of the main characters to die.
Yes.
Then you're watching a bad fucking movie.
Exactly. But and recently, this year, all these people are coming out, going, "Oh, Captain Marvel, we finally have a strong female lead." Did you forget about the Alien franchise?
Did you forget about Wonder Woman?
Yeah, because Ripley is one of the most badass, not just female characters, period.
Yeah.
I mean, that character is just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Sigourney Weaver, up until this point, you would never have believed that Sigourney Weaver would be an action star, but she became. I mean, you think of her more in the role of the mother of the baby in Ghostbusters 2.
Right.
Her apartment's getting hit with ghosts, possessed, and whatever in Ghostbusters. That's the Sigourney Weaver character. That's who she would have been.
Right.
But this character is just phenomenal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there have been more strong female role models. They just got buried.
And this is the genre that female characters actually excel in.
Yeah.
Because a good portion, I'm not going to venture a percentage, but I'm sure it's way above 50 that the last character alive is a woman.
Let's look at, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, Halloween. You have the chick from Scream.
Mm-hmm. The last person alive in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a woman. The last person alive in Nightmare on Elm Street is a woman. The last person alive in the woman who kills Jason's mom in Friday the 13th is a woman. So
last house on the left.
Woman. So what we're trying to say is, like, this is, even though women get exploited and always have been in this thing for, just being objects.
Right.
They are really the strongest characters in pretty much every.
And because it fits the trope of the underdog rising up and defeating the bad guy.
Yes.
And women have always, and I'm saying this not as a sexist, and but women have always been seen as the underdog, as the weaker sex. So therefore, to have them rise up and beat the killer, or whatever it be, whether it be Captain Marvel, whether it be Ridley, or whether Ripley, or whatever, whatever it is, to have them excel and come out on top gets the audience involved and draws them in.
Mm-hmm.
And we both agree women are just as good at things as guys are. Neither one of us are sexist. We love our wives, we treat them as equals, blah blah blah. But we're talking about horror movies, and in horror movies, women are the ones that actually usually win.
Yeah.
So, Captain Marvel, I haven't seen it. I plan to, and I think it's awesome that they have a female superhero having her own movie, but Wonder Woman also did too, and Wonder Woman also had her own TV show in the 80s.
Yeah. And Wonder Woman is hands down the best DC movie so far.
Yes, and at some point we're going to do a podcast on Wonder Woman, because I've read the history of Wonder Woman and the creator of Wonder Woman, and it's really interesting. But we'll do a podcast on that at some point.
It is interesting. That definitely will be on there. So we talked about The Exorcist being both of our favorite horror film of all time.
Yes.
Not counting The Exorcist, not counting the major franchises, and we haven't even really mentioned Halloween yet, but
we mentioned it, but that was about it.
We talked about it in our other podcast.
Right.
What is your favorite horror film outside of those that maybe somebody hasn't seen?
It's classified as a horror movie, but it's more kind of comedy adventure / horror, and it's The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox.
Oh, good choice. Peter Jackson film.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that movie. I've always been a big Michael J. Fox fan, but that movie, it's the trials and tribulations that he goes through and what he has to deal with through the movie that really makes it a good movie.
Yeah. It's got Chi McBride, who was in Boston Public, and he was the dishwasher from the movie Waiting. Everybody, you know who he is.
Yep, you had the drill sergeant from What Is Your Major Malfunction?
From Full Metal Jacket, yeah. And that's a cool story too, because it's a story about a woman who was the girlfriend of a spree killer. Mm-hmm. And then in the afterlife, she's helping him continue.
Right. Whereas, whereas, he was building a house for his family and lost his family. And then in a car accident and developed psychic abilities.
Mm-hmm. So that he was pretty much scamming everybody because he saw these 3 ghosts there, and then they would help him make money by like moving stuff in these people's homes, and then he would exorcise them and then move on.
Right.
But it's in the vein of Peter Jackson's earlier work. I think it's a good transition between his movies like Bad Taste to movies like The Lord of the Rings.
Right. Did he do Hellboy?
No, that was Guillermo del Toro, who was supposed to have done the Hobbit movies, but backed out at the last minute.
Okay. Yeah. So that being said, what is yours?
Okay, mine is also a more recent one, and it's more of an action, suspense thing, but it's a movie called Series 7, The Contenders.
I've never seen it.
And this is it's got I'm losing her name right now. She was,
I'll look it up. You can talk about the movie.
Okay. She was the victim from Silence of the Lambs, the one that was in the well.
Okay.
What's her last name? But anyway, what it is it's a reality show, but it's also shoot to the death. So you get 6 or 7 people that are the contenders for this week or for this episode, and then you have to kill the other contenders. The last one wins.
Okay. Brooke Smith.
Brooke Smith, that's it. Yeah. And she is playing this game while she's 8.5 months pregnant.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So she's there against teenagers. She's there against her ex-boyfriend gets pulled into this, which is it's.
So it's basically the Hunger Games,
but set in reality.
Okay.
And just for our amusement, just for TV. You don't even know what the prize is if you win until the very end. Then you get there's a twist at the end. But that's an underrated film that I think anybody who likes horror or gore or stuff should watch. It's more suspense than horror, but it keeps you going.
Right. So that being said, what about Scanners or Pumpkinhead?
Oh, we haven't even talked Pumpkinhead. Okay. Pumpkinhead is in my top 5 of all time. Okay. It hands down one of the creepiest movies I've ever seen ever. And the monster and the effects that they use in this were all what they call practical, no CGI,
right?
No computer animated. So you got this creepy demon that's chasing down these kids because, well, it all starts because Ed Harley, this kid, gets hit and killed by a guy on a dirt bike who hits him accidentally.
Right.
Lance Hendrickson, who was an alien, you know who he is, goes to this witch to raise the demon Pumpkinhead to enact revenge for the death of his boy.
Right.
But then he's a tormented soul, Lance Hendrickson, so he's going through all this shit while these kids are being killed by this demon in just horrific fashions. But it's just some of the visuals of the way that the witch was created and shot in her little thing. It's a phenomenal movie. I get excited about Pumpkinhead.
Right. And, without all of these movies, and really it kind of stems back to the, early film history with Boris Karloff and, the Psycho guy, can't remember.
Perkins.
Well, Perkins, but the director.
Oh, Hitchcock.
Thank you. It without these guys, you wouldn't have Paranormal Activity. You wouldn't have all the scary. You wouldn't have like American Horror Story, whatever that show's called.
Yeah.
So it's good to go back and see the roots of what it is that you enjoy and see where it came from and see how let's go back to that word, evolved.
Yeah.
But
that's another podcast, by the way.
Right. So, I mean, it's just if you enjoy something, go look at its history. Go look at where it came from and look deeper into these movies that you enjoy and figure out why you enjoy it. Because when you do that, it's like, what we talked about in other podcasts about self-reflection. You see that part of yourself and you can nurture it and feed it and grow it.
And look at, if you're into vampires, go back and look at the 1922 movie Nosferatu.
Yes.
It still holds up.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie's almost 100 years old, and it will creep you out.
Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely. And vampires don't fucking sparkle.
No. Period. End of story. And you know what? Not all werewolves are Native American.
Right. Not only that, but a couple 100-year-old vampire isn't going to fall in love with the teenage girl. He's just going to fucking eat her.
Right. And okay, cat's out of the bag. Let's talk. if you are a couple hundred years old, why the fuck are you still going to high school?
Right.
Why the fuck would you put on that persona? I'm going to go to high school again? Really? No. And every time it's sunny, you can't go to school because you sparkle. What the fuck? That's not. Go live in the woods.
And you don't think that people realize you've been in that class for 20 years and haven't aged?
Yeah. I mean, there's a wisdom in the eyes, and that's what they say a lot of vampires have, is you can tell their age by their eyes. So if you're a couple hundred years old and you still look like a 17-year-old, that sucks. Just like in Interview with a Vampire, where she's
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, I'm gonna look like this forever. She cuts her hair off and it grows back. But if you want to see the honest reaction of what a child vampire would look like, watch the Catherine Bigelow movie Near Dark.
Oh yeah.
Once again, it has Lance Hendrickson. It's got Bill Paxton.
Yep.
And it's a, for the lack of a better term, and I've seen other people describe it the same way, it's a vampire western.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's beautifully done. Bill Paxton is absolutely crazy, but there's a child that's with him. He's like a 12, 13-year-old boy who is spooky as hell. Especially when they go into this bar scene. It's like, why the hell is a kid with this group of ragtag people? But just watch Near Dark. You'll love it.
Right. Yeah, it is a good movie. So, I guess it comes down to, what do you hate about horror movies?
I hate that in every movie, somebody in charge makes the wrong decision, and that's what puts them in that situation in the first place. Meaning, let's not go that way. Let's, like Geico, actually, I'll give Geico credit for one thing. Their commercials are great, but they have a great horror film net spoof. It's like, let's go this way. No, shouldn't we go to the running car? No, let's go to the graveyard.
Right.
So it's so stereotypical that it's like, one, somebody's gonna make the wrong choice and go to the basement. Two, they're always gonna make the decision to split up. And three, they're always going to trip at the wrong possible moment so that they can't escape. And the other thing that I hate is when it comes to, we didn't even talk really zombie movies, but I want to sum them up in about 30 seconds. All zombie movies end up in one room, one house, and it just gets boring.
Right.
Even with something like World War Z, where the entire world is going nuts with zombies, they end up in a medical lab. And it's like, I loved the first part of World War Z where you got to see the whole world just going nuts because of the zombie apocalypse. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see Brad Pitt on the opposite side of a piece of glass from a zombie.
Right.
So that's my problem with like zombie movies, but the rest of it is always the same. It's like they make stupid mistakes.
Right. My problem is they're all fucking predictable. I can predict, after watching the first 5 minutes of the movie, I can predict everything that's going to happen in the movie.
And if they do make a twist near the end, it doesn't make sense to the movie.
Right. And, M. Night Shyamalan has done a lot of good stuff, but my ex-wife, I pissed her off because we wouldn't watch The Village. And within 15 minutes of being in that village, I'm like, I know the twist. She's like, what? I'm like, they're in modern day. No, they're not. No. You're wrecking the fucking movie. Okay. So I sat there, bored out of my fucking skull, until it was revealed. It's in modern time. Ha ha ha.
She almost gets hit by a car.
Yeah. I'm like, this movie is fucking stupid.
But then
they're all predictable. Shyamalan's predictable. His twists are predictable. Go ahead.
Like what I was saying, though, that twist from that moment when she almost gets hit by the car, and then they go on to explain that above that village is a no-fly zone. Above that village, there's all these different things that happen to where, they would make it feel like they were still in the, the 1700s. It's like, all right, the amount of cooperation it would take to not allow anybody to just happen up on
Right.
people. A hunter in the woods wearing bright orange walks out of the woods and it's like, what are you doing? Is this like a reenactment or something?
Right.
So it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to the movie, and you can't base 2 hours of somebody's life on, ooh, what if it was today and the people living didn't know? It's like, not really. Come on.
It's impossible.
It worked once. It worked in The Sixth Sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of worked in Unbreakable.
Yeah, but the thing is,
that really wasn't a twist.
Right. But when your twists are becoming predictable, you got to change it.
Yeah.
When your movies are predictable, you've got to change it. I'm not saying everybody can predict them. I know, and maybe it's because I grew up watching so many horror movies that I can predict what's going to happen. But make it new. Make it exciting.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what they tried to do in the 80s with the monsters.
Yes.
They didn't really try to create a better story. They tried to create something new with the creature that was doing the same story. So it's the same script. It's like, now it's the Boogans, but now we have the Gremlins in there, in the mine. It's the Boogans, but now we have the Ghoulies in the mine. It's, now we have...
Or Tremors, or,
now it's a leprechaun.
Yeah. Yep. Or it's a doll, possessed by a serial killer.
Yeah.
Because there was just a whole slew of them. And it's just, I want to see something new. I want to see something that doesn't follow the same trope as everything else.
There is a movie that came out recently that I think you would like, because it creeped me the fuck out. And it's a movie called Grace.
Is that with the baby?
Yes.
I haven't seen it, but I don't think I can watch it because that's baby. Is that the baby that is like cannibalistic, or?
Yeah, it's hard to describe. So the lady, the baby dies in her womb, but she takes it to term. Okay, so it like dies like 2 weeks early or whatever. But then she actually gives actual birth to it. But when it comes out, it's alive.
Oh, wow.
But the baby needs blood to survive. So she's trying to feed it. First it's like drinking her blood through her nipples. And then it just gets, it gets crazier from there. But it's not, Demon Baby isn't anything new. You've had The Omen. You had They Live,
Right.
Again, it's not anything. It's a new twist on an old story.
Right. And it's kind of like, telling the mother story of do anything to keep her kid alive.
And and that's really what the whole story is. It's a mother's love for her child no matter what.
Right. I don't think I can watch it.
And
just because.
I didn't give any spoilers because that's in the description of the fucking movie. So
right. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much more that they could do. They could expand on the whole ghost paranormal stuff. Those are the ones that I enjoy watching.
Mm-hmm.
Slasher movies just bore me.
Yeah.
Like the whole Scream franchise, the whole Saw franchise. I'm just like, can I have that 2 hours back?
The twist at the end of the first Saw movie, and fuck you about spoilers because I'm going to tell about it, I thought was really cool. Because the whole time you're there and what's his name? was it Ethan Hunt? Ethan Hawke, I mean. Ethan Hunt's the
Oh my God.
Mission Impossible guy. But anyway, no, it's Carrie Ellis.
Yes. Carrie,
Yeah,
Princess Bride, yeah.
yeah. He saws through his foot to get out of this room that they're in because they're chained, they're shackled. But then after he gets up and after he crawls out to try to go get safety, the dead man that's been on the floor this entire time gets up and walks out.
Yeah.
So that was a twist that nobody saw coming.
Right.
That the killer wanted to be in the room with them while they discussed all this stuff, and then still managed to be completely still, apparently non-breathing.
Right.
But that was a great twist. But then they just got campy after that. And it's like,
yeah.
Then he dies, and it's still going like 15, movies afterwards.
Yeah, it's too much. Let it go. There's a lot to be said about movies that don't have sequels that just stand up on their own.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even know if there are movies anymore that don't have sequels.
Even back then, there was those Hills That Have Eyes too.
Yeah, the 80s was the beginning of the sequels.
You had the second to last house on the left.
Right. It got so bad where you had Jason Goes to Space.
Yeah, right.
Jason Takes on Manhattan. Like, really?
Night Terror on Franklin Street.
Right. But yeah, there's stuff that can be done. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I want you to figure it out. I'm not making the movies. You make the movies. You make me interested.
Right. Give me money. I will make a movie. How about that?
There you go.
And then you guys can critique my movie like we're critiquing theirs.
Right. So with that being said, this one's gone on for like 2 hours, so we should probably wrap it up.
Yes.
We've talked about all the movies from our childhood, what got us into horror movies, all that shim shang shabang, walla walla bing bang. And basically it was a podcast about us talking about horror movies, talking about the ones we like, talking about ones we don't like, talking about what we don't like about them. And yeah, that's about it.
It pretty much sums it up right there. Yeah.
Yep. So as we say in all the other ones, if there's something you would like to hear us talk about, leave a comment down below, give us a like, give us a subscribe, share us with your friends, share us with your enemies. All that good shit. And love you guys. Peace out.
Yeah. Subscribe, follow us on Twitter, and insert tagline here. Till next time.
All right.